Okay, I'm ready. Becoming.
Trials and errors make us strong if we learn how to just move on and not give in. When we fall, falling down and getting up, when we will not be stuck in the places where we fall. We must see that there's so much to be. Keep on living through the trials we will see. Becoming who we'll be, it's not that hard if we can see. We've got to keep growing and not get stuck. Becoming you and me, we will become who we will be if we just hold on and not give up. We'll keep becoming. Oh, yeah. When we fall down, we must get up. We cannot get stuck in no rut, for then we'll see it's really not that bad. Many times we find ourselves caught up in all kinds of mess, and that's the plan that we'll give up. Oh, but we must see that there's so much to be. Keep on living through the trials we will see. Becoming who we'll be, it's not that hard if we can see. We've got to keep growing and not get stuck. Becoming you and me, we will become who we will be if we just hold on and not give up. Becoming who we'll be, it's not that hard if we can see. We gotta keep growing and not get stuck. Becoming you and me, we will become who we will be if we just hold on and not give up. We'll keep becoming, oh, becoming. We'll keep becoming, oh, becoming. To be, not quite what I will be becoming. I'll keep becoming. Said I'm not what I used to be. Not what I used to be. Not quite what I will be becoming. I'll keep becoming. I'm not what I used to be. Not what I used to be. Not quite what I will be becoming. I'll keep becoming. Said I'm not what I used to be. Not what I used to be. What I will be. Not quite what I will be becoming. I'll keep becoming. I'm not what I used to be. Not what I used to be. Not quite what I will be becoming. I'll keep becoming. Not what I used to be. Not quite what I will be becoming. I'll keep becoming. We must see that there's so much to be. Keep on living through the trials. We will see. We will see that there's so much to be. Keep on living through the trials. We will see. We must see that there's so much to be. Keep on living through the trials. We will see. We'll keep becoming. Yes, you and me will be becoming.
Well, good evening to each and every one of you. Thank you so much to joining with us tonight. You are tuned in to Soul Situations, a creative vlog. This is the second season, sponsored by Good to the Soul and hosted by me, the Reverend Shonda Nicole Gladden. I am so excited to have each of you in this space with us tonight as we enter into this second season of what has become one of my favorite things to do each and every month. So if this is your first time joining with us, I want to invite you to let us know where you're joining in from by commenting in the chat. We like to be interactive in this space, and so it works best when you submit your requests, your questions, your comments right there in the chat. And so let us know who you are, where you're joining in from, and engage the conversation with each and every one of our guests. Tonight, I am so grateful for the opportunity to be in conversation with three dynamic leaders. I have known most of them for close to 20 years, except for one whom I have gotten to know in the last 10 to 15 years. But even though our relationship has been shorter than the other two, it's still been as effervescent and full of joy. I hope that you will agree that these three thought leaders are people that you want to make sure that you know, not just tonight. So tonight's conversation, this weekend, we're entering into the celebration and the commemoration of the life and legacy of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Monday, we will celebrate his birthday and the federal holiday. And so I thought, what better way to kick off the Soul Situation Season 2 than to think on the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And of course, that means the life and legacy of the women who picked up his legacy when he was brutally murdered that solemn day in April of 1968. And so tonight we will be engaged in conversation with a pastor, clergy, activist, as well as a university professor, as well as someone who works in the policy space. And so without further ado, I really want to begin the night by introducing you all to these three dynamic guests. The first guest that I want to bring to the Soul Situation stage is Dr. Khalilah M. Harris. She is the Managing Director of K-12 Education Policy at the Center for American Progress and is a non-resident senior fellow with the Maryland Center on Economic Policy. Harris brings a unique perspective to American progress from an extensive career working to expand access to opportunity through a racial equity lens and community organizing, education policy, youth advocacy, and building an inclusive workforce. Dr. Harris is a regular contributor on MSNBC, and has published in a variety of news outlets, including the Washington Post. Are you getting excited? Education Week, the 74 Million, and others. She organizes nationally with the EduColor movement and served as the first deputy director of the White House Initiative on Educational Excellence for African Americans. A proud alum of Morgan State University, who you will see a commercial from before we end our night. Khalilah also obtained her doctorate in educational leadership from the University of Pennsylvania and her law degree from the University of Maryland School of Law. I want to bring her out. She's sacrificing some time on a day that is very important to her. Today is January the 15th, and so you will see her rocking some beautiful colors. So if you know what the colors mean, go ahead and drop in the chat some encouragement. Dr. Harris, welcome to the Soul Situations Room. Go ahead and unmute yourself and let the people hear you. How are you doing?
I am well. Thanks so much for having me. It's such a pleasure to be with you, my fellow Morgan Bear.
Yay!
I stop for the Bears. I love Alpha Kappa Alpha, but I will always pause for the cause when it comes to my fellow Bears. So thank you for having me.
Well, thank you so much, and happy Founders Day to you.
Thank
I
you.
know when I was an undergrad at Morgan State University, I really loved looking up to you and all of the beautiful women of the Alpha Delta chapter. So I'm just so grateful that you have given some time on this, your Founders Day night.
Absolutely.
So hopefully for people who are unfamiliar with your sorority, if they've been sleeping under a rock, if you will, that they may be inspired tonight to check it out, learn more about it, send their young people to university in anticipation of considering an organization like your own.
I mean, they can consider an organization that the first Black woman vice president of the United States is a member of. I mean, it's such an easy thing for them to obtain because those who came before them have created a pathway for them. So they should check it out.
Well, that is encouraging. I don't know about y'all watching, but if I had a child that was interested in life and life more abundantly, I would send them in the direction of someone who wears the 20 pearls and the beautiful apple green and salmon pink. That was backwards. Salmon pink and apple green, but
Still
never
the same colors.
Well, Dr. Harris, I'm going to bring out a couple of the gentlemen who are also here with us. And so Dr. B. Chris Dorsey is someone that I am very fond of, who continues to be a rebel and not give me any kind of bio whatsoever to introduce him. So what will I say about Dr. Dorsey? I will say that he is a dad, and I think that is the first thing that he would want me to say, of a remarkable young woman that he is raising as a solo parent. He's got a village, but he's doing an outstanding job. He's also a professor. He teaches at the Christian Theological Seminary, and tonight we're hopefully going to have a conversation about a course that you might be able to consider this semester. He is also a graduate of many, many degree programs that I don't know right now because, again, he is a righteous rebel. So what I'm going to do is bring him out on stage and let Dr. Dorsey share a little bit more about his background. Hello.
Hello, Reverend Gladden. How are you doing?
I can't complain. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Glad to be here. And thank you again for the invitation. To my sister, Dr. Harris, thank you for sharing the stage with me. And I'm just happy to be here.
Well, thank you so much. And, we have a bunch of moving pieces here. And so I do see your last communication. So thank you so much. I will say that in addition to those things that I've just shared about Dr. Dorsey, that he is the president of higher education and leadership ministries of the Christian Church Disciples of Christ. That is called HELM, an ordained disciples minister. He earned his Master of Divinity from the Garrett Evangelical Theological Seminary and is a PhD candidate. I am giving you your title and your accolades early on, but that's all right, because we believe that once a candidate, soon to be a PhD finished. What do you say it? Finished. That's it. Dr. Harris is giving up the accolades and the confirmation and affirmation that it too can be yours soon and very soon. So, Dr. Dorsey, in advance, Dr. Dorsey, I'm going to also bring out another dear friend. I tell you, the brothers, y'all just do the most. When I ask for a bio, Dr. Harris, thank you. I'm looking and my dear friend, a fellow graduate of Morgan State University, simply says, sis, please don't read my whole bio. Ain't nobody got time for that. And so in the spirit of not having time for that, I'm going to bring Reverend Dr. Heber Brown III to the stage for Soul Situations Room. Hello, friend.
Good evening. Good evening. How's everybody? Thank you for the opportunity to come, Reverend Gladden.
Yeah, no, you are so welcome. I really was enriched by your family devotions that you did at the end of last year, and you inspired a lot of the soul situation movement, if you will. So just thank you for being present with us tonight. I will tell the people that you are the senior pastor of the Pleasant Hope Baptist Church in Baltimore, Maryland. It is just steps away from the national treasure of Morgan State University, where I did meet Dr. Brown when we were in undergrad. And I tell you, Oh, the stories we could tell, but we don't have time for that either. But he is wonderfully married to Mrs. Shonda Brown, and together they have beautiful sons who are just so smart and so talented. And he even has a new little family member, a whole chicken. So we will get into what it means to be the father of a chicken in just a little while. But I want to give each of you an opportunity to share just a little bit, maybe a 60-second introduction for the people of what it is that you do, the thing that makes you come alive. What do you get excited about every single morning you wake up? And in that, tell us about why you think you're here for the Soul Situation Room. I'm going to begin with Dr. Harris and around the bend with Dr. Dorsey and Dr. Brown.
Well, I will keep it simple and say that my purpose, what keeps me moving in the daytime, other than waking up and making sure that my 3 daughters are taken care of, is to step on people's toes so they stand up straight.
Oh, I love it. Recently, I was quoting another theologian who said, we are called to comfort the afflicted, but sometimes to afflict the comfortable. So I love that you wake up ready to step on people's toes to make them stand up straighter. Thank you so much.
Every day, all day. Every day, all day.
Stay ready.
People coming and they're like, okay. And I'm fine with that. I'm happy with it.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Gentlemen, what wakes you up in the morning? What gets you moving? How do you enter into this space, the universe that God has created, with authenticity and boldness?
You know, I think I'm all about at this point in my life and my career and just trying to figure out how to empower and embolden other people to do the work of justice and transformation. And so a lot of what motivates me is trying to create space for other people to step into their voice, step into what God has for them to do, and to make a difference. It's a lot of why I teach. The courses that I teach is to help prepare leaders for the future.
Amen. Preparing leaders for the future. And a leader who is powered by a praying Black woman. Let us hear from you.
I'll say for me, something that wakes me up and gets me going is doing my part to operationalize and systematize some of the highest aspirations of the Black community. And that really is. I've been so blessed to hear from an individual sense, a congregational sense, community meetings over the years, hearing what Black folks have been saying, and then studying the history of the Black freedom struggle and hearing this pattern and this refrain over and over again, generation by generation. And I think it's a part of the sweet spot of what God has called me to operationalize that with, in large measure, the Black church as a base and a springboard for some of that, with the institutional stability and resources that Black churches have to bring that about. And so that's a piece of what really gets me going.
Yeah, no, that's remarkable, to operationalize and systematize the ways that Black flourishing happens. So I think I'd love to really start our conversation there. Dr. Heber, you're a pastor, right? An agri-activist and a lover of all things that lead to the flourishing of Black futures. To me, when I was thinking about what I would do for the January show, you embody the essence of the kind of Black Baptist preacher that I believe Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. might have become if he were not murdered in Memphis, Tennessee, that solemn day of April 4th, 1968. So I wonder, can you reflect on the ways that I've just characterized you and share with our viewers how you see yourself in light of that and what that journey has meant? You talk a lot about Black church power and the institutional currency that the Black church has for a flourishing Black future, but talk about who you are as you embody that kind of legacy of Dr. King.
Well, you bring my eyes real low to even suggest that I'm in the zip code, in the same area code as someone as glorious, as Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. So I'm humbled by that, and I pray I can live up to those words before it's all said and done. But I am grateful for the tradition in which King placed himself, and the many who are around him who helped to shape him. I did this workshop some time ago on the women who made Martin King. And I talk about Ella Baker, who I believe is one of the greatest organizers of the 20th century, who a lot of people don't know because partly because she did her job so well and took it so seriously to remain in the background and help to mold and shape others to step forward. I'm thinking about what Dr. Dorsey just said moments ago about creating space. So Ella Baker and Victoria Jackson Gray Adams and Mrs. Fannie Lou Hamer. When I study and look at the dynamic work of these women and how they shaped men and helped to shape the church to be what it is, even with all its continuous foibles, fumbles, and outright failures, for me, it remains that space. And so instead of, well, maybe not instead of, but alongside lifting up and celebrating King, I also get excited about spending time reflecting on the community that shaped King, because I believe that same pot is still cooking. The one that shaped King, the community that shaped Malcolm X, the community that shaped Queen Nanny of the Maroons, Thomas Sankara, I said Mrs. Hamer, and so many others. And so I don't know if I could be, I'll just say I'm grateful for the community and the tradition in which King is, and thankful for those before King. Reverend Vernon Johns comes to mind, who before the world knew a King, Reverend Vernon Johns was the OG that was really the firebrand for justice. And even before him, so many others. And so I just try to be intentional about locating myself in that tradition and the Black freedom struggle of Black pastors and religious leaders who saw a future and saw flourishing for us through the spiritual base of the Black church and in recognition of the spirituality of African people.
Wow. So I love how you have characterized the importance of community shaping and forming individuals for the work to which they are called. And, as I listen to you, I think about the ways that the K-12 system shapes the people, the little people, the new humans, if you will, that Black communities and all communities, of course, have been given stewardship over. And so I'm so glad that we have a K-12 policy specialist here, an expert. As I was thinking about this conversation, I wanted to be intentional about including a Black woman's voice, especially one who could contextualize the work of both Dr. Dorsey, Dr. Brown, and this legacy of Dr. King. And Dr. Harris, you immediately came to mind. So from your vantage point, particularly given your work with the Center for American Progress, talk about this importance of community shaping in a way that we can really stick our feet into it, stick our toes in it, and just dive headfirst into some action.
Well, first and foremost, I want to thank Pastor Brown for bringing forth and calling on the names of ancestors like Nanny of the Maroons and Ella Baker, and the women who stood fast for the men who were often in front of the movement, but these women who, without them, there would have been no movement. When you think about the K-12 space and the ways that education has always been a part of our African culture, it's always been prioritized. And the work that I'm doing right now on policy is I wrote a piece that came out in December calling on the new Biden-Harris administration to center community voice in policymaking. For too long, an education policy had been done to community instead of with community. And that is a central focus of the work that I do. I don't only organize at a national level, but in Baltimore City, where I live, have recently been organizing to make sure that school boards, that the school board in Baltimore City is primarily made up of the people, and that they should be elected into those positions through the voice of the people in democratic process. But the K-12 space is critical because it provides an opportunity where we see across time. You know, 3 of us went to Morgan State University. Education throughout our history in this country has been withheld from us through the system of white supremacy. And you go back to Prince Hall, who was not enslaved, fought in the Revolutionary War, and felt like he'd earned his place in Boston at that time, post the Revolutionary War, and was then told that his children could not go to school with the white children. And so a couple of things happened. People know Prince Hall from the Masonic tradition, but Prince Hall was one of the very first Black people in this continent who started schools to empower his children and the children in his community. And then from that legacy came the land trust institutions, historically Black colleges. Now we see with the school choice movement, which also has its challenges and issues and concerns, people who were able to start African-centered schools. Pastor Brown has a Reader's Cross Freedom School functioning out of his church. So when we think about K-12 education, too frequently people think about the government as opposed to how we use education to inject a liberatory philosophy into our children, and that education does not have to be necessarily in a schoolhouse that's managed by the government. But K-12 education should cut across from our living rooms in our homes and the parishioner halls of our churches and the meeting rooms of our mosques, and extend into the classroom so that our children are grounded in who they are and whose they are, so that they can critically unpack the information that's being provided to them or unjustly withheld from them in the public school setting. We know 80% of the teaching workforce in public schools are white people, mostly white women, and people take for granted the impact of that on our children. We have a lot of talk these days about integration being a silver bullet that's going to get us back on track, except integration, as it happened in its first iteration, ripped children from its community, from their communities, to put them in places that was hostile. People did not want them to be there, that their teachers who were professors, highly skilled because they could not get other jobs, were pushed out of education. And then they went to sit in classrooms with people who were less qualified than the people who were teaching in schools that were underfunded. And so when we think about K-12 education and what the possibilities are, we really need to be focused on demanding the best for our children, but also not presuming that the grass is greener on the white man's land. We need to determine what standards and what quality education looks like for our children, and collaborate and work towards that. And just calling out Pastor Brown again, you know, I'm a firm believer in owning the land. And it is critical. So these are things we need to be teaching our children about, that if, you know, a group of thugs rolled up on the Capitol and met with success, could we take our children, roll out and make sure they are fed and make sure they could feed themselves because they know how to take care of themselves. And self-determination comes in a lot of forms. And if you can't feed yourself, then you have a lot of issues in this country. So, you know, just bringing it all back, when it comes to K-12 education policy, it's very critical that people understand that public schools belong to them. They do not belong to the government. If you go to the store to buy a bag of plantain chips and ginger ale, you've paid some taxes that are going to be poured into a public school, and therefore you should understand that you own it. And as you interact with school boards and government entities or whatever the case may be, you know, I encourage people not to ask permission for the schools that they want to see for their children, but instead demand that people represent them in the way that they are elected to do. So I'll stop there, but, you know, my philosophy about education is one that typically sneaks up on people because I do sit in seats with people who hold a lot of power and a lot of influence, but I am clear why I'm there. And it is not to climb a ladder or to pursue my own ambitions. It's to make sure that the children in this country who look like me get the promise of their ancestors who were enslaved and are able to support also the genocide of the people who were stewards of this land. And I'd be remiss not to say that I sit on land that was withheld from the Lenape and Susquehannock people, and I'm grateful for them in preserving the land for as long as they did, or there wouldn't be land for us to be enslaved on. But I'll stop there.
My Lord and my God. Viewers, friends, comrades, if you didn't know why Dr. Khalilah M. Harris was the woman for this moment, I hope you know now. Sis, ma'am, friend, everything that you have said, I mean, my eyes are just filled with such great water, because you are spot on to remind us that public schools belong to the public, and that it is not just our right to claim what we need, but it's our duty. And you said if a mob were to storm the Capitol,
I said that meet with success, because what they did this time was shenanigans. But
shenanigans indeed. Friends, I know we need to keep this proverbial train moving, but she dropped so many nuggets, and you all are going off in the chat over here. Dr. Brown is even, I don't even know how he's going off in the chat. He's here with us. So they're just going off in the chat, because you are spot on. But when you began to talk specifically about taking back our power and ensuring that we as individuals ensure that our children have the greatest education possible and available to us, what better pivot in the conversation than to turn to Chris Dorsey, Reverend Chris Dorsey, who is soon to be doctor, because I believe in what I have witnessed of him, that he takes those principles very, very seriously. I am filled with pride every time I see the unconventional educational opportunities that he is granting his beautiful daughter. So Dr. Dorsey, you know, a lot has been said so much, but I know that you, again, provide unconventional educational opportunities for not only your daughter, but the students that you teach at Christian Theological Seminary. So can you talk to us a little bit about why and how you consider the work that you do as a professor to be liberative, and how what Dr. Harris has said really speaks to where you sit in your everyday life?
Yeah, thank you. So I'm a bit at a loss for words, having having to follow my brother and my sister, but I'm gonna do my best to offer what I have to offer. You know, the courses that I tend to teach are mostly graduate theological courses, and they focus on change, transformation, social justice, because I do firmly believe that that's the core of theology, is about transforming the world and bringing us closer to the realm of God that God would have us to inhabit here on this earth. And so what I try to do is I try to teach my students that the kind of theology that is most important is a theology that is liberative, transformative, and that inspires people to build a better world and to address the issues of systemic injustice that we have largely inherited as a society, as a church, and as a world. And so one of the courses that I teach is a course on MLK Jr. and Dietrich Bonhoeffer. I take their two theologies, the theologies that they have produced, and I try to engage it with contemporary issues. But I start by looking at what the two of them have to say about Christian community and the significance of what Christians in community should be doing. And so one of the things that I emphasize to my students is that for King, one of the primary roles of community, or the church, Christian community, is affirming, protecting, and restoring, if necessary, the human dignity of all persons while promoting human flourishing. Now, that's a lot of words in one, one sentence, but there's a lot to say about what King understood the value of community to be. And so what I see in the courses that I teach is we really are supposed to be about that kind of work. And so that's what I try to bring to the work that I do in teaching students and preparing leaders, is helping them to understand the centrality of human dignity. And I'll say this one part: we live in a country, when we consider the human dignity of Black folk, we live in a country that in the first instance was founded and predicated on the stripping away of dignity of Africans and persons of African descent. And so because of the fact that it was virtually founded on that principle, it's very hard for us to imagine that same country is ever going to do anything to affirm, promote, or restore the dignity of Black folk, because it was founded on the premise of stripping that away. And so I think that's one of the things I try to explore as we think about issues of race, as we think about issues of human dignity, and the theology that those of us who profess the Christian faith really should be focused on, and how we should be leading from that vantage point.
Wow, that is really, really rich. And you have hit what I believe is our sweet spot with Good to the Soul, this notion of human flourishing. And so we're going to get there in a minute. But all three of you, you've really shed a light in a very high level, perhaps even extremely academic way. And we have viewers from all kinds of walks of life. And so let's bring this conversation to the street level, if you will. Let us talk to our people. What does it really look like to materialize, to actualize the work that each of you has talked about in a way that honors the life and legacy of the communal upbringing of King and the women of his context? But for everyday folk, how do we make this thing plain? And any of you can jump in and answer that question.
So I would love to jump in here, because I said at the top that a part of the passion of my waking up is to step on people's toes so they stand up straight. And for me, one of the barriers in the justice work that I do is typically middle-class Black people, because too frequently we have folk who believe that their pursuit, again, of the white man's greener grass or the white man's colder ice, it means that they have done something for themselves, until they put their children in a school that is in a high tax bracket, and their child is called the nigger the first time, and they never prepared their child for that. So it's incumbent upon all of us to, I don't like the whole remember where you come from, because sometimes we conflate remaining in our darkest times as credibility for being able to speak to how to get out of darkness. And we know that's not how it works. If you want to talk about Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego, when they were in the fire and saw that light and saw the fourth person standing with them, they were trying to be brought out of the darkness, not to remain in the fire and in the darkness. So too frequently I hear people say things like, you're not from around the way, you're not from the hood, you're not still in the hood, why are you trying to speak for us? And it's like, for real, either we're trying to talk about liberation, or are we trying to remain in our circumstances that's a product of white supremacy? And a lot of people don't understand the nuance of what they say when they're like, you're not from the hood, so you can't speak from, or you're no longer in the hood, so you can't speak about. And I think we need to disrupt that. And the other side of that coin is, if you have obtained some level of education, some level of success or affluence, this country was not founded for us. And as long as you are pursuing a life or a version of life in this country that was established by Europeans and established by people who do not want to see you succeed, because that would mean they have to relinquish their power. No matter how good of a person they are, it is very difficult for somebody to give up their power. And as long as you are pursuing what they have, as opposed to pursuing what we as a collective have established as strong community where our children can thrive, then we're going to have a problem, because I like nice things, right? So I'm not going to say that I walk around in $5 sneakers, and I want to be in a place just so I can have the street credibility and be like, I'm what's dude's name, Bill Gates or whomever, riding around in a Ford. Rich people, they ride around in a Ford Taurus. Okay, that's not true, because they have somebody who picks them up and drops them off. So okay, they can have a Ford Taurus in their parking lot of their 4-car garage in their 10,000 square foot home. So don't come at me with what white people do and don't do, what rich people do and don't do. The question is, what is the life that we want to lead in this country? We all are educators. I teach as well in education policy and in culturally responsive pedagogy and teaching, not to use jargon. And, it's a wonder how young people come to college and what they do and don't know about themselves and about the world around them. It's really important for us, beyond education, again, in the classroom, to continue to educate one another. I am in a number of groups with Black folk. One of them is called the 2A Black folk, for those who understand what 2A is, the Second Amendment. And it's really critical for us to understand the law, use the law to protect ourselves and to protect our families, but also to commune with one another, right? This 2A group, we're going to go to a cabin to the mountains, and we're going to do some hunting to make sure we know how to use our bug out bags or bailout bags that you would use in the case of an emergency. Why have one if you can't light a fire for yourself or you don't know how to put up a tent? But that commune philosophy with us, those families that bought land in Georgia, the 19 families, and was like, you know what, we out, in the spirit of Araminta Tubman's voice. They were like, look here, everybody stack some cash. We're going to buy this land and live how we want to live. And I was having a conversation the other day, and I'll stop. I know we're running on time. I was having a conversation the other day with my brother Changa Onyango, and Changa and I were talking about how people perform Black liberatory philosophy. And, they feel like if you're not walking around in a head wrap and kente cloth and, talking about oils and incense and sage in your house, that you're not real. If you're not a vegan, you're not real. Listen, I'm a carnivore, and I will wear a mink coat and all of that good stuff. But if you want to talk to me about who I am, I'm going to tell you who I am. I'm going to tell you who you are, whether or not you want to believe it. And so it's important for those of us who obtain certain types of education to keep educating ourselves and to keep communing together, so that our children understand that they have a safety net that's not required by them going to XYZ school or working in XYZ organization, but that there's also nothing wrong with them doing that. And we have this frenetic relationship with one another where we qualify who's real instead of identifying what's not real in ourselves. So I'll stop on that.
Brothers, either of you want to jump in and respond to the previous question, or shall we allow Dr. Harris's comments to remain? Go ahead, Dorsey.
I'll add one more thing. I think, going back to what Dr. Harris said, I think there has to be a way of us understanding the connectedness of all Black people, regardless of where we fit within the socioeconomic structure. And I had I'll say I had the benefit of having an intervention by my doctor who, a couple of years ago diagnosed me as approaching diabetes and being pre-diabetic, and prescribed for me to participate in this diabetes prevention program. And in it, there were people from all walks of life in this one class. And we spent about 1.5 years together on this journey. And one of the things that it taught me is that the forces that prevent us from being healthy and being whole are the same. Whether we're on the east side of Indianapolis, south side of Chicago, north side of Chicago, Chicago suburbs. And so one of the things that we have to understand in terms of health disparities, it affects all of us. And those are the kinds of justice issues that I think we have to be intentional about connecting and understanding that on a basic level, we're all dealing with some of the same injustices and the same inequalities. When I lived in Holland, Michigan, I got stopped by the police in the span of 6 months, 4 times in this one city. And so what I would tell my colleagues who taught at this white institution with me is that we live in 2 different cities. You don't live in the same city that I live in. And the Black and brown people that have migrated here, I have more in common with them that migrated here to, pick blueberries and apples and whatever else the migrant workers were doing. I have more in common with them than I do with you all sitting in these offices in tenure track positions at these institutions. And so I think we do have to pay attention to the fact that we're facing some of the same injustices and the same problems. And the more we can be real about that, the more we can unify in talking about those issues and addressing those problems, the better off that we will be.
And I know time is on us, but thank y'all. Thank you. I was like, why does my sister have me come on Friday night? I go to bed about this time. I go to bed real early, y'all. I wake up early, but I go to bed early too. So I'm like, only because I love my sister is I come in here and I'm like, thank you, God. This is why I'm here tonight. What y'all are sharing and saying is doing something, making my heart flip. And I just have to thank you, Dr. Harris, for just, your sharing and it's all that you shared. One thing that really just makes me just giddy is the way that you challenge Black middle class values and the way that you help us to think about the limitations of individual success. Individual achievement for individual Black folk has never been enough to challenge the oppression and change the tide for the masses of Black people. So the push toward collectivism, communalism, the push toward that. And we have a sacred canon that we don't visit enough to see where that has shown up, which is why I appreciate also the space for political education, for popular education. So if the colonizer's educational system is not going to teach you about the deep and long cooperative history in our community, we can have our own spaces and circles to do that. Our Sunday schools don't just have to be about what heaven's going to be like when you get there. In fact, there are so many preachers, and especially in liberationist circles, heaven is God's stuff. Whatever happens for heaven, that's God's going to deal with all that. We here and we now. And so I just want to look up real quick. Jessica Gordon Nimhart has a dynamic book called Collective Courage, A History of African-American Cooperative Economic Thought and Practice, where she writes about the mutual aid societies. She writes about the free African societies, pre-Black church. She writes about the ways in which Black folk coming out of the Civil War organized themselves in the late 1800s, early 1900s. I believe, family, especially given the political climate that we're in right now, that in a certain way we've returned to that space and time where dependence on the systems of other folk is very glaringly clear to us that that is not an equation for our flourishing as a community. Maybe individually you can make some dollars and individually you can do all right. But I know I'm on the screen tonight with folks who not just thinking individually, but we're thinking about our descendants, our great, great, great grandchildren, those who are coming behind us. So we have there's canon here. There's a canon in Mrs. Fannie Lou Hamer's work with the Freedom Farm Cooperative. There's a sacred canon with respect to Reverend Albert Clegg and his book, Black Christian Nationalism, New Directions for the Black Church. This is a sacred canon. Reverend Vernon Johns with Farm and City Enterprises. So in other words, there are Black people who over history, let's go to past 100 years, who give examples and templates and blueprints for us to follow. And for me, what calls to me is that focus on land, food. I love Dr. Harris, Second Amendment, And you better listen. You better get over it. Whatever Western white theology has taught us about shunning self-defense, get out of that. Mama Ida B. Wells said every respectable black person should have a rifle somewhere in the house. Praise the Lord. And especially when the FBI is saying that white supremacists are planning across the country to have protest. Listen, don't be so saved that you can't defend yourself and your family. But that's another show. I'm not going to let that tonight, Dr. Gladden. But I will say Charlie Carr wrote a book called "This Nonviolent Stuff Will Get You Killed." I would just invite us to go check that book out too. But I'll just say there is stuff that we can go to, and I think whether it's the Black church or other spaces, and I'm clear on how problematic the Black church is on so many fronts. And I'm also clear that in terms of economic autonomy, in terms of owning assets, in terms of owning land, the Black church community collectively is the largest landowner in Black America. So we can't just discard. We need to challenge it. We need to push it. And for those of who are called to this space, it can be a powerful organizing space so that we can, just like the Black church gave birth to so many HBCUs, so many mutual aid societies, hospitals, clinics, libraries, that same generative energy is here now. And I'm just declaring myself to be one who's committing the rest of my days to linking up with those who want to organize and build and supporting those who are reforming the system. And so I know there's a reforming of the existing system. And I've grown to the place where I recognize the importance of those who are inside the system and trying to work from the inside. Praise God for those who are doing that important work. And there's another lane, and that lane is build something for yourself. And when you put those two together, they can be wonderful in complementing the bigger picture of a collective liberation. Shonda Murray Brown here in Baltimore often says, freedom is individual. Liberation is collective. And I'm hungry for liberation.
So the chat is on fire again. I'm hungry for liberation. What a place to land on as we are nearing the end of our time together. I'm just overwhelmed, overjoyed, and just extremely grateful that the three of you have given of your time and your knowledge or your thought partnership for the Soul Situation Room. It is not every day that people hear from thinking Black people in these social media spaces. And so in our last kind of 60 to 180 seconds, that gives each of you a rough amount of time, maybe 60 seconds. I normally ask each of my guests, how do you define flourishing? But I think tonight that all three of you have, in one of your comments or more, talk specifically about human flourishing. So I want to let your remarks thus far hold true for what the answer to that question might be. But I do want to ask us again in the last few moments, what are you looking forward to in 2021? You know, we talked a lot about liberation, community empowerment, the ways that we grow together. And thank you so much for the book recommendations. But personally, professionally, as you think about what makes your soul prosper, what are you looking forward to in 2021? And perhaps give people some information about how they can connect with you to bring some of those future ideas to pass in 2021. Any of you can jump in.
Why not? So if you want to reach me, I'm pretty easy to find on all platforms of social media at Ed to Be Free. That's ED, the number 2, BEFREE, Ed to Be Free. I'm on Twitter, I'm on Instagram, and on Facebook under that username. I will say that 2020, I've said to so many people and joke about today being December 47th, 2020. instead of January 15th, 2021. But I will say, as someone who holds faith and understands what hope and faith are about, it's about the unseen and not necessarily patting ourselves on the back for getting something that we prayed for at some time or another. And I've said to so many people through last year, and it's a difficult thing to hear, that we needed 2020. 2020 was about clearing out things that we wouldn't let go of on our own. It was about elucidating things that we did not want to see. It was about allowing people to be laid to rest who have been fighting a battle. You know, when you think about Chadwick Boseman, and people are so sad, and I'm like, this brother was fighting for years with that cancer. And I tell people the story of how his brother, who I believe is also a pastor, said that the day before he died, Chadwick asked the family to let him go because they had been praying for themselves to keep him here. But that wasn't God's will. So 2020 was about showing us things that we needed to see, clearing things out to make it possible for us to receive what is promised to us. So I look at 2021 in that way. Even with the tumult of the beginning of this year, I feel like 2021 is going to show us some things that we couldn't believe would exist. Even with the virus rampaging and taking new form, I believe 2021 is going to be an exciting time for new beginnings for us.
I love it. New beginnings. Thanks so much, Dr. Harris. Dorsey or Brown? Go ahead and unmute yourself.
So sure, I'm excited, continue to be excited about the work of the Black Church Food Security Network. We're organizing Black churches and Black farmers across the country. Last year, 2020 was a banner year for our mission and organization. When it became clear that the corporate food system that all of us rely on was not as sturdy as we thought. And when we saw bare shelves, it helped to get the message across very quickly to a lot of people that we need to have our own food systems, micro food systems, wherever Black people live, and network them together like a grandfather clock so that we have farmers and churches and landowners working strategically together. So I'm excited about that continued work this year. We're only going to continue to grow. I'm also excited about Aretha's Cross Freedom School. Dr. Harris shared earlier. We just received significant funding to really grow the organizational capacity and, you know, to come to a place now where the things that God pushed me and the ancestors pushed me to help bring into the world now have the financial resources to live beyond me and become systematized. That operationalized and systematized piece is so important to me because it'll be a nightmare if I leave from this place and everything that I give my life to goes in the box with me. And so I think it's very important for many of us to think about how do we operate? How do you download your genius? How do you systematize and download your genius so that it lives beyond you as well? So I'm excited about that. And finally, as you know, Dr. Gladden, I have a sabbatical coming up in 2 weeks. I'll be away, quiet, reading, writing, and resting for 3 months, writing my first book on legacies of Black food sovereignty and Black land sovereignty through the Black church. There's a story there and so much history there. And I pray that it can be part history book, but also more so a manual and workbook and a tool for organizers so we can reimagine what ministry looks like, reimagine what theology is, reimagine what our churches can be doing in our communities in our current time. And so blackchurchfoodsecurity.net, go there, check it out. I'm not going to say email or social media because I'm about to disappear off of all of that. Y'all pray hard for me as I try to endeavor to do my part to throw some breadcrumbs to the future. So they have a Sankofa to reach back to.
Well, thanks for saying that last part because I was going to ask you for your Twitter, but that's right. You get 3 months to rest, and I'm going to try to be a great sister and not bug you while you're on sabbatical. But, you know, you're my heart, my homie, my ace. And so rest well on your sabbatical.
Thank you.
I'm looking forward to the book. We need the book. So get it done. Reverend Dorsey. Last but not least,
I'm looking forward to the many people who are stepping into public spaces and raising their voices and leading in ways that may not be recognizable to some of us who have been around for a while, but they're getting stuff done. And so I'm looking forward to the ways in which younger people and newer people are starting to lead and change and make a difference. One of the things that I recognize is that if we look at where we are today, we still have large swaths of our communities that are basically living in the same kind of economic system of the late 1800s. It's kind of a sharecropping economy that we still inhabit. We still have lynching, the same problems that Ida B. Wells, spoke about. It's a reality for us in 2021. And so if we have not broken away from the plight of our ancestors from the late 1800s, then we really need to do some work to make some inroads and changes. And one of the things, I'm convinced that we need economic empowerment, but I'm also convinced that we also need to be looking at different ways of thinking about what economics really is about. Again, what Dr. King said about human flourishing was largely predicated on an American notion of human flourishing that is individualistic. And we need to move away from this idea of individual human flourishing and think about the kind of communal flourishing, especially that both Dr. Brown and Dr. Harris have referred to in the sense that that should be our ambition. 2021 and beyond, human flourishing should be about communal human flourishing and not the kind of individualistic human flourishing that this country was largely based on.
Wow. All three of you have warmed my heart. And yes, I'm a Methodist pastor, Methodist preacher, but my heart is strangely warmed because the three of you are in this space with me tonight. I want to thank you so much. Our viewers, thank you. If any of you are available, we'll jump over to the Clubhouse. If you don't have an Android, yes, Shade, that at 9:30 we'll be there and having a conversation. I will be in the Clubhouse just briefly. We'll hold you for an hour and then we will get off. I'm going to send you all back and say farewell. Thank you so much for joining with us as I close out the night in conversation with our guests. Each and every one of our guests tonight, they brought the fire. If I could pay them all millions of dollars, I would, but I cannot. But you all may be able to send a little something to help us to make sure that we at least give them an expression of gratitude. And so I encourage you to visit us at www.goodtothesoul.com if you would care to make an investment to keep programming like this going so that we can sow into our guests. Of course, not a requirement. If you are on the Cash App, you are also able to support by sending over a Cash App. They asked me to do this because I don't normally do this. And I felt a little awkward doing it. But, sometimes it's a sad frog that doesn't promote its own pond, as what the elders would say. So if you have capacity, if you have means, if you have interest, the ways to invest and ensure that we can continue to keep programming like this going is available to you. We are a little bit over time tonight, but I do want to close with a commercial from someplace that is so near and dear to at least three of our hearts. If you have joined tonight for the first time, join us every month on the 15th of the month at 8:15 p.m. right here for the Soul Situations. Next month, February 15th, 2021 at 8:15 p.m. I hope to see you in the same place, same time. Until then, though, take care, God bless, and keep doing those things that are indeed good to the soul. See you next time.
For more than 150 years, Morgan State University has positioned its graduates to grow the future and lead the world. Morgan students receive a world-class education, engage in meaningful research, and uplift their communities. Over 126 programs conveniently available online or on Morgan's beautiful campus. Designated the national treasure, there's something for everyone. Pursue your purpose. Progress in your passions. Achieve the promise of career fulfillment. Your Morgan experience awaits. Choose Morgan.
Thank you again. Have a great night.